Taylor, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the news from earlier this week in the Mike Gundy change at Oklahoma State. Doug Meacham has spoken with the media, the team, and Gundy talked to the team for a little bit. What was your overall reaction? Surprised, timing, or it was time?
No, I wasn't surprised, and I thought it was the right move. And, you know, once you lose at home to Tulsa after the streak that they've been on and the struggles all of last year with all the expectations, and then, you know, overhauls his staff, overhauls the roster, and then for the start of the season, look, it was time. And my hope is that once the dust settles and as early as, you know, once we get through this season, that Oklahoma State fans can appreciate what Coach Gundy, or maybe that's now, that Oklahoma State fans can appreciate what Coach Gundy meant to Oklahoma State, but also to the sport. We were talking this week on our show about, if you had to create the Mount Rushmore of Big 12 coaches, who's on that list? And to me, he's on there. I mean, when you think about the success that he had at a program that was sub 500 for its history before he got there, I think it's him, Mike Leach, Bob Stoops, and Mac Brown of the top four coaches that I would have in the history of the Big 12. And again, it was a program that did not have a lot of sustained success. I think it was 17 or 18 years in a row of him getting them to bowl games. And then in 21 and 23, they're runners up in the Big 12 and knocking on the door. They're 6 inches away from making the college football playoff in 2021. So all of that to say, it was the right time. It comes to an end for everyone at some point, and most coaches don't get to ride off in the sunset. And so, it was time after the home loss to Tulsa.
If I put you in the room with Chad Weiberg and he said, Taylor, you got to tell me who to hire. Who's your top choice?
I understand all of the Oklahoma State fans saying they want Zach Robinson. To me, an up-and-comer that is winning at a place that hasn't been able to do it before, that I don't know if they could, if Oklahoma State fans would feel satisfied with this hire, but I would want GJ Kinne from Texas State. I think he has proven he can recruit. People believe in him. He hires well on his staff. And his ties to the state of Oklahoma from his time as a quarterback at Tulsa, I think he would ingratiate himself with the coaches in that state. He obviously has already done that in the state of Texas. And to me, those are the only two states that you really need to recruit if you're at Oklahoma State. And to me, GJ Kinne would be my favorite. Any school that's in the South, for the most part, especially a Texas or Oklahoma type of school, GJ Kinne would be my top choice. But again, Zach Robinson, their former quarterback, who's at the Atlanta Falcons now, he's going to be extremely high on the list as well. And then John Summerall at Tulane, I know he's extremely popular to me, and I don't mean this in any sort of slight to Oklahoma State fans, but to me, I think there's probably a bigger job that will be out there, like SEC kind of jobs that I would imagine, like a Florida that may come open later in the year, that I think Summerall may be a fit for. But GJ Kinne would be my top choice if I was Oklahoma State.
Taylor, the big game this past weekend that got the most discussion in the Big 12 was Texas Tech and Utah, and Tech goes in there, and by the end of it, it's clear who the better team was in Salt Lake City. I mean, it was a very impressive victory, and made even more impressive by the fact that they lose Baron Morton, and then here comes Will Hammond, and by the end of it, you're going, should this guy be the starting quarterback for this team? Just curious your thoughts on what you saw from that game that stood out most, but particularly that quarterback situation. We just had Joey on, and he obviously isn't going to reveal anything to us, but as a guy who's been in a quarterback room at the college level, how do you think they go about trying to best navigate what, you don't want to turn into a sticky situation there?
Yeah, well, two parts. I'll do reaction first and then talk quarterbacks. My reaction was Texas Tech was the better team, and Utah was fortunate that game didn't get out of hand earlier. I think Texas Tech, their turnovers in the first half, Baron Morton did not play great. The stat that has kind of been hammered to death over the course of the week, but I'll repeat it again. Explosive plays per PFF, Texas Tech had 14 and Utah had 1. And that, I thought, really summed up the game really well, that Utah, whether it was Devin Dampier not really getting loose running the football, and then anytime Utah did catch a pass, the yards after catch was really non-existent. I thought Texas Tech was in the right spot on defense. I thought they were the more physical team. And in the second half, when Hammond came in the game and Utah started, it was a ton of man defense. Hammond made them pay, whether it was throwing the ball downfield. He had a couple of runs that he broke loose on. And then on the quarterback situation, make no mistake about it. It's a good problem to have, but it is a challenge for Joey McGuire and that staff, where if you decide, and I imagine they will, this is still Baron Morton's job, if he goes out against what is a pretty talented Houston defense next week on the road, and I'm telling you, if there's 1 3 and out, you're going to have their fans, but certainly their fans, but even on the sideline, guys are going to be looking at Joey McGuire like, hey, we may have the better quarterback standing over here on the sideline. So it will be really interesting to see. If you're Joey McGuire, you're hoping that if you go, I imagine he's going to go with Baron Morton. If you ride with him, you're hoping that he goes out and lights it up in the first quarter against Houston and kind of puts that to bed. But if you see Baron Morton struggle and there's an early turnover again, I would not be surprised at all if we see Will Hammond in the game early.
I just realized that we are giving Rice University an amazing amount of exposure. We had Scott Abel to start the show, and now Taylor McHargue an hour later.
And Taylor definitely been the option.
Yeah.
Running the option.
Yeah. They're 3-1. They have Navy. That's an intriguing matchup, and that conference at the top of the American is really good. I saw a couple of your notes. You like the opening drive, all that. Your thoughts about what Abel's done, and it seemed like it's kind of like a feel-good story.
Well, they're certainly off to a great start, and road wins at Louisiana Lafayette, who was, I think, picked to win the Sun Belt or at the top of that league. And then, win over Charlotte on the road. Rice has been terrible on the road for a number of years. And even though Charlotte's going to end up at the bottom of the league in the American, winning a conference game on the road is important. And I thought Rice, if you take away some of the penalties, they probably win that game by 3 or 4 scores. So I'm extremely encouraged by what Coach Abel has done. I just on a personal level, getting to visit with him a handful of times this offseason, I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the program. He's brought a shot in the arm to Rice, and the gun option, when they really get it rolling, that's going to be a difficult offense for teams to stop because you don't see it very often. It's different than the triple option because I think it's a little more multiple than a traditional triple option that's under center. And the closest offense that I've seen in the last few years that is similar to this is when Liberty really had it rolling. They went undefeated and played Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, and Caden Salter was at quarterback. That offense, to me, is the highest level of where I think Rice could end up being. If you get a dynamic quarterback that really can run the ball well and deliver a handful of shot plays downfield, I think it's a team, it's an offense in a league like the American that you could really do some damage. And for their first season, look at their schedule in the back half. I think there's still 3 or 4 wins that they can go get on this schedule. And if Coach Abel can get them to a bowl in year 1, man, that exceeds expectations, and just really excited for him and his staff.
Well, I asked him about, do you feel confident in your ability to grip it and rip it, throwing the ball if you have to? And he said yes. And then the other thing about it, we talked to him about just acquiring that talent and filling it in. You kind of have to approach Rice like a military school, like Army or Navy, because of the academic rigor that it is. And this really does allow you maybe more of stability than trying to always, fit kids into the system you're trying to run every 3 or 4 years when you change coaches.
I think that's right. And I think there's also a unique opportunity with a place like Rice because the degree does have some weight behind it, and it's a powerful school, and it's a place that in the portal, I think you're not going to get the top recruits every year that enter the portal are going to go to the kind of the places you would expect. But I do think at the G6 level, if Rice has some success, that's a place that you may be able to go get somebody that you otherwise wouldn't have because of the kind of the notoriety of the degree. But it requires winning first. It's difficult to. It doesn't matter how good your school is. If Rice hasn't had a winning season since 2014, if Coach Abel and his staff are able to turn that and say, look, we've got some NIL money, which is more than I think people realize, and we've got the ability to get guys into something like the Rice MBA program, that presents a really unique opportunity. But it takes winning first. And I'll give a lot of credit to, and look, Smoke, I agree with you a second ago. This is probably way more Rice football talk than all of your listeners here for, but I love it. The last thing I'll say on this, Reggie DeRoche, the relatively new president, and Tommy McClellan, the athletic director, have done a great job of making football a priority again. And I say again, I don't know that it's ever been a priority at Rice. And there's a lot of momentum that comes from the institution and the people behind the scenes as well that are supporting Coach Abel.
Taylor McHargue with us, college football analyst, ESPN, and also with CBS.
Taylor, what do you think about Tempe Friday night, the Frogs of TCU and the Sun Devils of Arizona State? TCU's looked really sharp. ASU with the big victory over Baylor there at the end last weekend in Waco, and two obviously very talented quarterbacks. How do the quarterbacks play into this one? And just overall, your thoughts on this important early conference matchup?
My first thought is I've got 2 games next week, so they gave me a bye this weekend. So
Nice.
I get to sit here and watch every one of these games, which I'm so fired up about. And we get to kick off with what is the best game of the weekend in the Big 12 and one of the best games on a loaded slate all weekend. I think this is maybe the most under the radar. Josh Hoover's been unbelievable this season. I think this will be a lot has been made of, TCU looked great on the road against North Carolina, but the more we've seen of North Carolina, the more I think we all realized that win wasn't maybe as impressive as we thought. What has impressed me about Arizona State is that they got off the mat, and Sam Leavitt, after really playing poorly against Mississippi State, he looked much better a week ago. I think it's going to be a really physical game. And what I'm most curious for is, Jordan Tyson for Arizona State may end up being the number 1 receiver, the top 3 receivers certainly drafted next year. Sam Leavitt's got to figure out a way to mix up throwing it to somebody other than him. Through the first few weeks of the season, their production's been dominated by Jordan Tyson, and I think TCU is going to try and take him away. And then also Sam Leavitt, I believe, is still their leading rusher. That's not something that I think Arizona State wants to hang their hat on. So, how can Arizona State be a little more multiple on the offensive side and spread the ball around a little bit? But, man, I think it's a field goal line right now. I mean, I think this is going to be a really competitive physical game. And, this is going to have implications for whoever wins this game. I think is in the driver's seat right there with Texas Tech in the Big 12.
Taylor, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the number with Mateer's injury in Oklahoma?
Man, I know that Oklahoma, their messaging is that it feels like trying to downplay this. I would put it at a 6 or 7 to me, because operating on a throwing hand in the middle of the season scares me. And I know that it sounds like played through this against Auburn, and so that is encouraging. But, man, for a guy that wants to run around and does not shy away from contact, you worry about, does he ding this again later in the year? And I get, if you look at Oklahoma's schedule with the bye week coming up, I think, and Kent State, I believe it is, it's this weekend. I get that they're trying to knock this out now because they feel like the game that they really would be most worried about is Texas. I worry about later in the year, does this any sort of re-injure this or get it banged up again? But hope that it's just the 4 weeks that they talk about. But anytime you operate on a throwing hand, that makes me really nervous.
Taylor, what's your favorite game this weekend?
I think it's Oregon and Penn State. I think Georgia and Alabama, it's hard to pick against that. But Oregon, Dante Moore has been unbelievable. And I just want to see, is Penn State for real or not? This is a team, I picked them to win the national championship. At the beginning of the year, CBS had us put together our graphics for, all the superlatives and who we think wins the national championship. And I put Penn State. And I haven't seen anything from Drew Aller that really gives me a lot of confidence in that to this part of the season. Now they get Oregon at home, obviously, and it's a whiteout environment. It'll be unbelievable. But if you ask me who looks more impressive through the first part of the season for two teams that haven't really been tested yet, I would say Oregon. So I think this is one that we will learn so much about these teams. And for all the stuff that we hate about conference realignment, it does provide us games like this, that this will be as good as it gets in our sport. Oregon traveling to Penn State for a night game. I just don't think you can beat that.
Taylor, enjoy the games this week. Which game do you have?
You said he's off.
Oh, that's right.
I got two next week. I got that Thursday night in Las Cruces for New Mexico State, and then I've got Fresno State on Saturday night.
Okay.
So they gave me an off weekend, so I'll be sitting on the couch watching a bunch of football.
Well, that's always fun.